Welcome everyone, Costin here with my campaign overview guide for Malagor the Dark Omen, the second most powerful of the legendary lords of the Beastmen. And he does have quite a few campaign benefits. It's not quite the same as the extra mechanics that Taurox does get, but what he does have is fairly solid, and out of the baseline Beastmen legendary lords, I would certainly recommend him the most between Mogur and Kazrak and him. Now, campaign-wide benefits, you do get a dread reduction cost of minus 50% for all hero capacity upgrades. So when you're trying to increase your hero capacity, what over here is going to be significantly cheaper than it is for the other legendary lords. Then you get 10% campaign movement range, always nice to have. Hero recruit rank plus 5 for Brave Shamans and Great Brave Shamans, which isn't necessarily something I would care when it comes to the Lord options. Yes, the extra hero crew ranks can be pretty substantial, but I would much rather have a Beast Lord as a Lord. But the hero benefit certainly is significant. You also start with a Gorbel. Now, a Gorbel is a great hero choice to start with because you do have this particular choice here in the skill line. The one I would personally recommend the most is this one. The reason I'd recommend Strength of the Land is because it gives you a significant amount of armor benefit to units in a range. So you can blob up units and give them an enormous amount of armor. This is actually really important for Beastmen, that kind of armor benefit, because a lot of the Beastmen units, certainly the ones that are going to be massing, like Ungor Raiders, they have pretty low armor. So being able to buff their armor by such a substantial amount, and of course you can have multiple Gorbels in an army, is pretty great. Now you do start with 2 Ungor herds, 2 spearmen, 2 raiders, a feral manticore, a giant, and 2 harpies. Now the harpy benefit is the harpy situation is a bit ridiculous because harpies are not necessarily really good units. They're decent flyers, but really not the kind of units you'd want to focus on. Now, Malagor himself gets movement range plus 50% when using beast paths. He does reduce enemy casualty replenishment rate by minus 100% for enemy armies in a local province. This is actually pretty substantial because if an enemy is stupid enough to invade one of your provinces, of course they're going to be dealing with a lot of caste corruption, which will cause attrition, and they won't be able to recover from that while Malagor is in province. He reduces leadership and he causes fear for harpy units in his army. So a couple of harpies can always be useful just because of the fear effect for his own army. Now, on top of that, he is a caster, and he's got some pretty powerful stuff over here. In terms of his special skill line, he reduces enemy leadership even further, gets a Winds of Magic benefit, a unit capacity for harpies, a massive 20% missile resistance, he causes terror, he reduces the hero action cost and increases the hero action success chance for Brave Shamans. Not important at all, considering how heroes at the moment in the campaign are not really useful when it comes to their agent actions. You're always going to get more use by just putting them in an army, especially these caster heroes. Then you get the Mantle of Crows, which can do quite a bit of damage within. It's a passive, and the way this works is you get in range, and any units that are within that range, if you're in melee, will take that damage. Of course, you have to get in melee with a lord that's not necessarily suited for that, so just be careful of that. You do get an armor benefit, along with an armor benefit for certain units. The crucial ones I would say over here are the harpies, because you may want to have a couple of those, but the gorgons, the jabberslives, the cygors also benefit quite a bit from this as well. Or you can focus on dual wielder, which gives you a weapon strength bonus, as well as a charge bonus for Malagor himself. Personally, I think the armor bonus is the right one. Now, here's where he is a bit insane, and he's a really, really powerful caster. He gets Flock of Doom, Enfeebling Foe, the Pendulum, Doom and Darkness, which reduces leadership. Then he gets Mantle of Gorak, which gives allies within range a significant benefit in terms of their melee ability, though it reduces their armor by a significant amount. and he can also summon a Sigor. Then he's got a second magic skill line that's basically all about the buffs. So he can get bestial surge, wild heart, life leeching, smoke and mirrors, and of course more winds of magic cost benefits. So he has a lot of things going for him as a caster. Now, looking at his campaign situation, one of the things to understand about the Beastmen is virtually everyone hates you. One way or another, they are not gonna like you. Even the greenskins, which don't have an aversion, don't expect... they do have a bit of a aversion. Not the savage orcs for whatever reason, but the regular greenskins do. A lot of factions just hate you. The aversion can be pretty substantial. And another issue that you're going to face during the course of your campaign is the following. So let's say you fight the battle, you win a battle, fairly easy battle, right? Well, the problem is the Beastmen will take substantially more casualties due to the out-resolve than many other factions in the game. Now, the reason this is important is because the AI makes the decision on whether or not to attack you based on your perceived strength. So if the AI perceives you as being weak, if your strength ranking is low, then the AI is far more likely to attack you. And because virtually everyone hates you, then that's going to be a problem. Even demons and chaos don't particularly care much for you, and Skaven don't like you all that much, let alone factions like the elves or the empire, the lizardmen. They do despise you, so you're gonna have a lot of foes. Now, when you're playing a Beastman campaign, you do certainly have some benefits. You are capable of generating chaos corruption in a province, and you can raise every settlement in a province or in the area of a Hearthstone, and then prevent those settlements from being occupied due to the blood ground mechanic. Though it is notable to say that Scarbrand's campaign mechanic, where he has a chance every turn of occupying ruined settlements, isn't affected by this. I played this campaign as Scarbrand, and what Malagor always does in his campaign, he always takes the settlements, he always puts the Hearthstone down here, and he always does a ritual very, very quickly, while Scarbrand really isn't affected by that. Now, with that in mind, the key to success is to use the Hearthstones themselves. One of the things to understand is that the garrisons of the Hearthstones can be pretty substantial. They don't necessarily start as very substantial, but you can get buildings with garrison units, and as you upgrade it, of course, in levels more and more and more, you will gain even more substantial garrisons. And because enemies have to take chaos corruption to actually get to it, these Hearthstones can be difficult to assault, or rather they're difficult to assault for the AI. Keep in mind your armies do have an ambush stance, or they have multiple ambush stances, so you can always lure an enemy into attacking you, and that's one of the things I would recommend doing, because one of the mistakes you can make when you're playing a Beastman campaign is you try and get the ritual very, very quickly. Now, that can be beneficial, of course, because that will unlock certain units, but the thing is, you really want to get to Ruination level 2, and then get to Ruination 3 and beyond for the extra Hearthstones, the army capacity in particular, because you're like the Tomb Gangs, you only start with one army. And that can be a bit of an issue, because the army you have isn't necessarily the greatest in the world. On top of that, to increase the level of the Hearthstone to get various benefits, you need to spend Dread. The way Dread is gained is by just fighting battles. The one thing I would say you should never use Dread for is to increase unit capacity for any unit until you've gotten a bunch of these upgrades over here and you've unlocked the other Legendary Lords for the Beastmen. Like, once you've gotten all the other Legendary Lords and you've gotten pretty much every upgrade here, that's the point where you can go for unit camps. Now, you shouldn't be too worried about the armies you're going to have in the campaign until that point, because here's the thing, you're always going to have at least one unit of each type. Like, as you unlock units through the Ruination meter, you're always going to have one unit of each type. On top of that, there's also a bunch of regiments of renown. Though I admit it is kind of shitty, because you are obviously going to be using a lot of Ungor raiders during the course of a campaign. Like the Spearmen, the Chaos Warhounds, they're absolutely not worth using. these are the units that you're going to spam, especially in your secondary armies. You can get a pretty powerful main army due to the regiments of renown, as well as unlocking unit recruitment even through the Hearthstones themselves. My recommendation when it comes to Dread is you first probably want to increase the Hearthstone level to at least level 2 or 3, just to get that defensive bonus. After that, you want to improve Horde armies, and then of course get Lord and Hero heroes being recruited at a higher level, being very beneficial. Though you don't necessarily need to go too far ahead of this, because getting this is going to be fairly expensive. I would certainly get this particular upgrade to increase it for Horde armies to start at tier 2. The other things here are not necessarily too important. Getting Hearthstones to tier 2 free, that can be important. Getting at least Lord and Heroes being recruited at rank 5 can be important. So I would say this upgrade, these two upgrades are pretty vital. Once you gotten those upgrades, you could play around with just tier 1 Hearthstones, but there's downsides in that. There's going to be downsides in terms of like the units you can recruit, like getting tier 3 Hearthstones can be useful. Tier 4 even for the Minotaurs, though you can recruit the Minotaurs from a tier 3 Horde army, upgrading that to tier 4. It's not necessarily hard to get a lot of growth, by the way, over here. I would say tier 3 Hearthstones are great because of just the garrison that they do provide, as well as the corruption benefit. And then, so get these two upgrades, get these two upgrades, and then get the Legendary Lords one at a time. That's what you should do with your initial Dread. After that stage, you have a lot more freedom. You could get all of this and all of this, or you could start increasing the unit camps. Depends on how you're feeling about it. My recommendation when it comes to the unit camps, what you really want to increase are the Minotaur unit camps, the Jabberslaves, the Cygors, the Gorgons, all of that stuff. And of course, don't ignore the hero capacity either, because that is important. Gorbals, Wargors, Brave Shamans. You might actually spend a lot of the points you get for a large portion of the campaign over here to increase that hero capacity to a decent level. At least 3 each over here before you start increasing the individual unit capacity. It is a shitty campaign system, I'm not gonna lie to you. The reason it's shitty is because the problem with the system, of course, is that it basically pushes you in the early game to fight with a bunch of really weak units, and you don't want to get any of these upgrades. Like, getting upgrades for unit capacity for any of these units, actually, even all of these units, is just a waste of Dread. What you really want to do is get unit capacity for these guys. But of course, what you really want is to get all these upgrades here. The army capacity in particular is important, the Hearthstone levels, and of course using gold for the various benefits you can get, the items you can get, like the campaign movement range, some of the other items as well. Now, in terms of your campaign plan, here's what I do. You take your initial settlement, you put a Hearthstone down in it. Now, with that Hearthstone, you have the ability of gaining points with these settlements. My recommendation: taking the floating village very quickly once you've recruited some units. Like, obviously get the head on spikes. You want to get this to a high level very quickly. But get the floating village. And once you've taken it, keep recruiting units, keep getting those Ungor Raiders, get a full stack, and then start marching your way to Mordheim. The thing is, you don't necessarily want to attack the settlement and take it very quickly, because one of the things about the Beastmen campaign is like just picking your battles, because you do gain points with you get devastation points the more enemies you fight within these grounds, within this particular area, for instance. So if you can fight a couple of armies of the vampire counts over here, and they certainly will have multiple armies, that might be the best decision before moving on to this settlement. Now, the reason I'd recommend you take that particular approach is because one of the things you want to do in this campaign is you want to actually go north. So that means dealing with Warzak. Now, If you rush Warzak, he's gonna throw a lot of armies at you. He has a pretty substantial garrison in Ekrund. You are kind of against the clock before you can get the tier 4 settlement here. He's very likely going to get the tier 3 settlement by the time you arrive there. But the thing about it is, like, if you can attack Warzak with 2 armies as opposed to just 1, so if you can get to the ruination level of 2, that will give you a pretty substantial benefit. Throwing 2 armies in that fight, it's still a difficult fight because you don't really have a great siege army, because these Ungar raiders kind of suck at killing units beyond the walls, and you're just gonna lack the melee capacity to just storm the gates. You have magic, absolutely, you do have benefits in magic, but it is tricky winning sieges with just that. By the way, I would recommend getting 2 armies, throwing them against Warzak. He's likely going to have 3 stacks, but the thing is, if you wait, if you take some time, take some turns to just like allow the vampire counts to build up multiple armies, the best thing you can do is wait for them to recruit a couple of units, then get a second lord while they're still recruiting units, then attack that second lord. If it doesn't run away, great. Even if he runs away and you chase him down, even there, because you're still getting devastation points. And eventually, of course, taking the Savage Orc capital. And if the Savage Orcs are stupid enough to try and attack your Hearthstone, just double back to it, defend it, hold them back. Do not lose a Hearthstone when you're trying to do a ritual. You'll lose all the points. By the way, move north. Keep moving north. What you're really aiming for, you want to put a Hearthstone down here in Ekrund, get the devastation points from all of these settlements, fight Warzak's armies. That will give you even more devastation points, and then take the settlement, and then you do the ritual, the second ritual. The third ritual might just be put down in Barak Var, because there are a bunch of settlements over here that are available for that particular Hearthstone. So you can take advantage of these settlements here, do your third Hearthstone here, and then your fourth, the Dwarven capital. Now, this is a tricky one, of course, because it's either going to be Skarsnik or it's going to be Forgrim in control of it, and both of them can be substantial opponents. Thing is, by the time you arrive here, you should have enough power to deal with the situation. And the reason you want to put a Hearthstone down in Karazak is that it gets a benefit. It's one of those special Hearthstone locations. There's a couple of them. I'll post a link in the description of this video to the ones that are in Immortal Empires, or the ones people have seen. There's also another one in Black Crag. So maybe your 5th Hearthstone, you want to just put it down in Black Crag, take down these settlements here, do that ritual, and keep that Hearthstone. Like, just keep these 2 would be pretty important to hold. The other ones are not so important to bother with. And then Drakenhof, I believe, has one, if I'm not mistaken. Altdorf certainly has one. So take advantage of that situation. That should be your campaign plan. But just be careful, because you have a lot of factions around you. They have a lot of power. Your early game power is limited. Don't be afraid about playing more defensively when you're playing the Beastmen. Your initial Hearthstone should be pretty safe. There's only the Savage Orcs and, of course, Khemri. Khemri is not going to attack your Hearthstone. The Savage Orcs is very easy to deal with. The Vampire Count's easy to deal with. Be aware of Queek, because Queek can be an issue. You might even want to take him out quickly, maybe after you dealt with Warzak. Maybe even rush him and deal with him before you deal with Warzak. Because here's the thing about Warzak. What Warzak's going to do is he's going to take his armies to invade Barak Var. He's going to succeed in that, but he's also going to lose a lot of strength in the process. So that's the moment to strike. If you have 2, maybe even 3 armies. So you can take advantage of that situation. Just put a Hearthstone down here in one of these settlements. Maybe even in Queek's capital, or maybe in this particular settlement would seem like a good idea. And then you could, alternatively, instead of going for Barak Var, you could go for Black Crag. There's only minor factions. The only major faction here is Queek himself. And you can defeat Queek in a straight-up battle if you don't allow him to get too many stacks. If you allow him to build up, that's when it becomes a problem. The Dwarves of Karak can be an issue, but they're going to spend a lot of resources fighting Clan Vermin over here in Death Pass. Either way, you want to head over north and just expand into Altdorf, get the Legendary Lords, and get those special Hearthstone locations. You don't have any particular factions you need to eliminate for your short campaign victory conditions, though you do need to eliminate the Wood Elves in Lorem, and eliminate the Empire as well for your long campaign victory conditions. So those are the goals you do have in your campaign, basically eliminating the Empire. That's what you're aiming for. And that's all there is to it. In terms of the units, I'd bother with recruiting and in terms of focusing. Minotaurs are always good choices. A couple of Jampercypes, Cygors, Gorgons are really good choices. Those are the units you want to get. Everything else is chaff. Everything else is pointless, meaningless in comparison. Chaos Spawn can be decent, but it's not worth spending the dread unless you have a significant amount of it. One of the things you can do is get a lot of armies with this structure, because if you do that, you're just going to get a significant amount of passive dread generation per turn. That's all there is to it. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.